I'm Christine Poplau, a senior manager here at Broadloom. Today, we're going to tackle some common mistakes that happen here using the back end or the accounting side of BMS and how to correct them. Let's jump in. We're going to talk about a variety of items, but mainly we're going to hit sales processing, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and the general ledger. And in those different modules, there are a lot of times timing issues. And these timing issues, like I said, can occur in any of those modules, but they're definitely items that cause differences in your agings or your subledgers and comparing those to the general ledger balances. And what a timing issue is basically not matching your revenue and expenses to the same time, or making sure that your transactions just make sense timing wise. So sales processing. The things to remember about sales processing and timing issues is that a lot of times it occurs when you don't match your deposit date to the date that the job was invoiced. So I have a job here that was, or the order was placed on 9/22. Let's say it was installed on 9/25. It's really September revenue. I have a payment from the customer that they just brought in today. If I post that as a deposit, it's going to post it as of 10/1. That's the day I'm going to be taking it to the bank. I don't want to backdate that. But if I post that and then backdate this invoice to September, my deposit report as of 9/30 will not agree, because when this job's invoiced for 9/30, the adjustment that's posted to record the revenue is going to relieve that deposit. So we want to make sure that if that's the case and we know we want to backdate this invoice, that we're going to change this to, instead of a deposit, to a post-customer payment. So that's the biggest issue that we see. The other is when jobs are credit memoed and rebilled, that they're not done using the exact same date. So if I have a job that I have invoiced and I want to do a credit memo on it, and I want to make sure that, or I want to do a credit memo on this job, I don't want to go back and use the invoice date here, which obviously I wouldn't be able to because that was 4 years ago. But I would want to do the credit memo and rebill using the same day. That ensures that your accounts receivable is going to be correct. And it also ensures that the customer gets an invoice using a date that makes sense to when they were called in. Now, if you say that, oh, wait, this job was invoiced on 9/30 and I need to fix it, you can certainly backdate that and use that 9/30 date, but make sure you use it for both the credit memo and the rebill. The other place where we see issues is when you're building the job and creating the job. Now, I'm a firm believer that when you are creating a job, the salesperson knows probably 99% of what's going to need to go into that job. They've done a quote, they've given the customer a dollar amount that they're going to have to pay. So they should know basically what is in that job. So in this case, we've got a job built where we're going to install carpet and we're going to do a small repair. Now, let's say that the installer turns in their labor bill and they don't bill you for the repair because it was small and you don't want to pay them. In this case, you could change this line. Well, this installer's already been paid, so we wouldn't be able to change that line. But let's just say they hadn't. This would be zero. You could zero this line out. The other thing you could do is now we could go into the installation system here, and it does say not paid. So I could edit the payments and change that. I could modify it, and I could change it to say, oh, nope, I'm going to pay him $35 because he's a good guy. He takes care of me. Or, like I said, you could just not pay it at all. But you want to make sure that that line is either paid or is a zero amount. The other issue that we'll see is that a job gets invoiced and a labor bill is turned in later. There's not a line for it, so it's hard to pay that installer. And you end up having to do like a credit memo rebill and adding that line to get the job cost correct. So my suggestion is ensure that all those lines are there. Make sure, and whoever's entering the orders, if it's your salespeople or order entry desk, that they understand how important all those are. There's also a report, and that could be found in job costs. So let's go there, job cost reports, outstanding costs versus customer invoices. So we're going to look at this report, and this report's going to show me where I have invoiced a customer for something that I have not paid an installer for. So here's that report. And we can see that we have approximately $5,600 on the table right now of labor that we have charged a customer for and that we haven't paid. Now, the kind of scary thing about this is somebody can go in and pay an installer on these jobs because these lines have been left open. So if I were to go into this job here, 115412, but I want to go in via the installation area, I see that here, this line has been paid properly, but these two haven't. So I want to either pay a house installer to leave that job cost on the order, or I want to mark it down to zero. Now, marking it down to zero and not paying an installer could result in additional commissions paid, but you don't want to leave these open. So either a house installer or mark them down to zero and then run this through being paid. So let's jump into accounts receivable. Accounts receivable, there's two things that we see. Usually it involves posting payments. And what we run into is that, number one, you get a check and you're not sure what customer it is, but you're given an invoice. You can put in that invoice number and find what customer, and it's going to tell you. So you can accept, and it's going to say, this is what's due. So I'm going to go ahead and post a payment here for this customer. In this case, let's say it was for $413.11 and they pay me $414. Great. I'm very excited. Got my payment. I've got my check number. I add the payment and I see, hey, there's the invoice they were paying. If I double click on this, it leaves a balance of 89 cents. So instead of doing that, I'm going to modify this payment and I'm going to put in a negative, not $89, but 89 cents. And that takes care of the entire $414. And it's saying, hey, you've got a discount. Do you want to apply it? Do it on the same day that you're posting the check. Let's say the same customer sends in another check another day, and it's for $492, and I'm adding the payment, and I go to post it here, and it leaves a balance of 57 cents. Well, if anything less than $1 and my company says, nope, that's fine, we'll just modify that and take it as a discount. So here I want to unapply this, and then I'm going to modify and give them that 57 cents. And now there's zero due and their account is clean. And there's no stragglers or balances left. The next item that I want to talk about is the AR report that's called Payment Distribution Report. What this report does, and it's just a simple report, you select which branch you want to do and hit continue, and the report will pop up and it will look like this. Now, this isn't a collection report. It's not necessary to update your general ledger, but it is a helpful report to see, okay, who paid us? How did we apply the payments? Are there any straggler balances left? So if you're not catching those as you're posting the payments, you would catch them here and you might see a small balance left. Here you can see one where we posted a payment and we took a 40-cent negative discount, which would be income for us. Here's one where we actually took a $50 discount. So this is a good report to ensure that you are keeping your balances clean on your accounts. You don't see those like little balances left when you look at your aging. The other area that I want to talk about is the customer account maintenance. this is an area that we really highly suggest you don't use this very often. There are other ways that you can fix your customer accounts, usually through a credit memo or through posting payments somehow. The one area where I did use this a lot was when I did my bad debt write-offs. But the one thing that we want you to be sure to do is when it asks for your general ledger account, do not, capital letters, do not use the accounts receivable. This is just looks like a one-sided entry. It's not. The other side of the entry is going to be accounts receivable. So when you're doing this, you are looking here for the customer that you're going to apply it to. You are going to select what kind. An invoice will increase the customer's account balance. A credit memo will decrease the customer's balance. So here I'm going to say it's a bad debt, or I could say bad debt and put in the date. And I usually put some sort of letter with that. Generally when I'm doing bad debts, I may have a list of customers that I'm going to be writing off. And in this case, I want to make sure that my item number will not be used again. So that's why I'm putting the entire date and then a letter. So the next customer may be BD 10/01/24B. In this case, I want to say I'm writing off $100, and you notice it must be negative. So you put the negative sign in. You can do that before or after. And then as you come over, it's asking for the GL account number, and you would put that in and save it. So in accounts payable, this area is the next section we're going to talk about. And there's a couple of items here. And we want to talk about voiding checks. And that is done here in the hand check void check. You want to ensure that when you are voiding a check, I'm going to look at Mohawk, and I want to void a check, and I've got these checks that are available to be voided. Now, when I select a check here, this check has not cleared, or it wouldn't be here for us to void. I want to be cognizant of this void date. If I have already completed a bank reconciliation, I don't want to go back and change my bank rec to void this in a previous time frame. What I want to do is actually make sure that my void date is today or in a month that I haven't done the bank rec. And then if I'm going to be reissuing a check, so I'm going to select this item to void, ask me if I'm sure, and then it's done. So you don't get any kind of check. Hey, are you sure this is the date you want to use? So if I'm voiding something, I will often go up and change the void date before I select and hit the void button. Now, if I'm going to reissue the check, I want to make sure and use this same date. My void and my reissue date should be the same. They should be in the same period so that my agings don't get off. Hopefully we're plugging this kind of hole so that that doesn't happen in the future, but currently just make sure that you're doing that. Now, if instead I want to delete that AP item, I'm going to need to run my check register first, and the same thing with if I'm voiding and reissuing, I want to run my AP check register. So I would go to my check register and run that. And then I could go in to open item maintenance and void that AP item. So I could go find whatever AP item that I had voided the check, and then I could do an invoice inquiry and delete the invoice. So just make sure when you're voiding checks and reissuing or deleting the invoice that you're using dates that make sense. You're not backdating them to when they were originally issued or to a month where you've already done your bank reconciliation. The other item that we want to talk about involves your inventory. There is a report in purchase orders. So let's jump into that real quick. In purchase orders, and it is called it's in your receiving report, and it's this AP not invoiced. This is going to give me a list of all of the inventory that I've received and I haven't posted my AP invoice on. And in this customer's case, or in this company's case, they've got 2 that they haven't entered yet. So we want to go in and make sure that these get posted timely. So I suggest running this report maybe once a week, maybe once every other week, to make sure that you're keeping up on your receiving. It's a good place to make sure to catch maybe any errors that happen in the receiving process as well. So if I have an invoice that I need to enter, finding it on this APR9 is really helpful. The other thing is when you're entering an invoice for inventory, you want to make sure that you're reviewing that inventory. So yes, we all do it. We all back out a little bit too far. So let me go in here and log back in. So I'm going to go into my accounts payable, open item maintenance, and I'm entering a Shaw invoice. So I'm manually entering it, and got the invoice number. And here for my PO number, I'm going to type in the PO and I'm going to review this item. It's going to ask me about care. So here, if I say, yep, that's the correct amount, and I hit exit, I've not approved this invoice. Approving this invoice does a couple of things. Number one, it marks the inventory item with the invoice number. Number two, it ensures that the job cost is correct. So here I want to say yes to this. And when I have the Y here, it is approved and I am good. So I can go ahead and exit. And here I'm going to note that it's for $46,800. I'm going to exit and it's going to ask me to put these items in. And notice that the merchandise balance might be different than the beginning balance. This is just for the cost of the inventory. And it triggers that your discounts are correct. And let's say you keep track of your freight differently. So we're going to put that in for freight. And I can accept this. Once I accept this, and I go into all of my invoices, and I'm going to look for that invoice that I just entered. So here's the invoice I just entered. If I look at the view AP log, it's going to tell me what the PO cost was and what I actually did. Sometimes those are different, but if I don't approve this properly and I look here, there won't be any information. So that's one way to make sure that items are getting approved correctly, that the job cost will be correct. The other thing that I want to mention is when you're entering an invoice for inventory, you want to make sure and use the same period that the material was received. So, a lot of times there's timing differences between when your vendor may print the invoice and you actually receive the goods. If you were to backdate that invoice, you're going to get a message that says this inventory was received at a different time. This can cause, by using this date, it will cause reconciliation issues. Don't discount that note. Maybe exit out and redo that AP invoice so that it's using the date that it was received, so that you don't have these swings when you're trying to reconcile your inventory because you posted AP before you actually received the goods. And let's exit out of accounts payable and let's go to the general ledger. So we're in the general ledger, and in account maintenance, you're going to see a general ledger period date maintenance. And in this, it's going to tell me what periods I have open. So over here, we call this the soft close. And the soft close allows us to start our financials or to stop people from posting in a period. So in this case, we still have period 1 open, but I'm in October now. So I'm going to change this so people can only post into period 9. But they don't need to make any adjustments to accounts receivable. They may need to post some AP checks for items on the bank rec, but they probably don't need to post any more cash receipts. We don't want to make any changes to our inventory, and we don't want anyone to post any new invoices, customer invoices. So I'm going to save this. Now this is called, again, a soft close. It's really important to do this before you run your sales tax reports so that people aren't backdating invoices and causing that to change, or making any changes that could impact your financials. Payroll, I forgot that one. that is for a module that no longer exists. So I always just put that at the farthest open date possible. So like I said, this is called a soft close. You can still make general ledger adjustments, and you can still go back and change this date if you had to for some other purpose. These months over here in red are hard close. That means we can't make any types of changes. Those are a lockdown and they're finalized. Now, if I look at 2024, I have these periods all still available. Looks like tax return hasn't been filed yet. Therefore, period 13 is still open in 2023. Now, the hard close, you can only have 12 months open. And once you hard close, it cannot be reopened. Like I mentioned, those are finalized. But this is where you would do your end of month processing. And obviously here, I can't do that yet until I close period 12. So if we go to end of month processing, actually, I apologize. I had that wrong. It's telling me I need to close period 13 and the year before I can close period 1. So in this case, it popped me over to end of year processing so that I could do that. Again, these are final. Once they're done, they can't be redone. The other thing that I would like to talk about is journal entries. Honestly, journal entries should be limited as well. There's really no reason to be using them when most of the items that you can do can be done in the system. So the one thing that I do use it for is for posting like my payroll. Now that could be done in AP as well, but I like to have a journal entry template where I may have my payroll entry here and I can just plug in the items. Depreciation or like prepaid items you could do there. But when it comes to items like other cash flows, outflows, you can use AP or enter credit card charges. And I know that sounds weird. I'm not using my credit card. Why would I do it? So I'm in my bank and I want to post my bank fees. I could go into my options, enter credit card charges. And hopefully we're going to be changing this to say like enter payments. And I can come up here and I can add a new vendor. So I want to just enter my bank, let's say Main Street Bank. And then I can set up a default and I could come down and find my bank charges. I could save that. And now as of 9/30, I had a $15 bank charge and I close this. It automatically creates the AP item and marks it as paid here. I'm a huge proponent of using that instead of using a journal entry because there's better tracking and it makes everything look a little bit cleaner in your system. So those are the main issues that we find on the back end that cause problems. Hopefully this discussion is giving you some tips on how to avoid them. If you have any questions, please contact us at bmssupport@broadloom.com. Thank you for attending today.